데이비드 알톤의 세 번째 메시지는 생명윤리 세미나에서 발표됩니다. 낙태 이슈에 대해 발제한 신동일 한경대 교수에 이어 데이비드 알톤은 안락사 합법화 문제를 보다 면밀히 고찰합니다. 그는 의료 데이터 왜곡과 인간 판단의 불완전성을 지적하면서 인간이 가까운 이들에게 의존하며 사는 일은 권장돼야 한다고 역설합니다.
I'll argue today that in society at large, the legalizing of euthanasia leads to a profoundly negative shift in our attitude towards the terminally ill and other vulnerable patients, particularly disabled people. Also, there are consequences for the practice of medicine when the commitment to care becomes a commitment to providing the option of killing. Take the example of Alzheimer's. There are very few people who haven't had a friend or a relative contract dementia. It's estimated that worldwide, some 55 million people are affected by this unwelcome disease. I remember being very moved by a Korean novel which explores the theme of loss of mind and the loss of a loved one. Please Remember Mum, published in the United Kingdom as Please Look After Mother by the critically acclaimed South Korean author Ga-eun-suk Shin, is the story of a 69-year-old Sonyo who is separated from her husband as they're jostled by the crowds in the Seoul subway. As the doors of a departing train close between them and she is separated from her loved ones, they begin a desperate search to find her. When they ultimately come to terms with their loss, it is only after they've had to consider the life of the woman, the mother, who had made so many loving sacrifices for them, the memories that she represented, and the identity which she had given to them and their lives. That is the way to come to terms with the loss of a loved one, not by arranging a lethal injection. Any of us who have had the sad experience of being with someone we love as they die, especially when they can't remember who they are or who you are, knows how distressing this can be. And anyone who's been with someone after they've received a diagnosis telling them that their life is coming to an end knows how traumatic that can be too. So as we look after mother or father or a loved one, this points to the need for unconditional love and support, not the implicit message that we would prefer that they were dead. We need a society in which such good palliative care and treatment is the norm. In the case of dementia, but it's true of other illnesses too, it is crucially important that we invest our time and resources to ensure that dementia patients receive proper care. Happily, huge strides are constantly being made in combating previously incurable diseases, and we must continue to search for cures, as well as providing adequate resources for palliative care. Dependence on others is natural at certain stages in life. At birth, we were dependent on others, and for that matter, for a considerable time afterwards. Neither our entry into this world or our departure from it are straightforward or trouble-free. Dying is part of living, and that too may well make us dependent on others. We must try to be less fearful of this and question the mantra drubbed into us that independence and autonomy are themselves gods. Dependence is not a cause for shame. It should be a given attribute in a civilized society that a person will be cared for with compassion and not ignored or regarded as a burden. Nelson Mandela regarded the principle that I've just expressed in an African phrase about Ubuntu, that a person is a person because of other people, but the wider community has a responsibility to hold the intrinsic value of another person, that our responsibilities are towards one another. The over-exaggerated focus on ourselves, on our rights rather than our responsibilities, on me rather than you, is at the heart of many of the ills in the world today. Patient choice is clearly a good, but it's not the only good, and sometimes there's an overriding good, not least by the way in which law and the practice of medicine always demonstrate how society values human life and in all circumstances. So what does this tell us about the values of a society where becoming an economic burden will determine your right to treatment, compassion or care. In a letter to the British Medical Journal entitled How to Really Save Money in the National Health Service, policymakers argued that assisted suicide and euthanasia, I quote, would allow health expenditure to be substantially contained. Be clear, our laws have traditionally protected vulnerable people from such pressures, but they've also protected the vast majority too, who, when the homicide law is relaxed to accommodate euthanasia, leaves people open to pressure from those who see killing rather than caring as the compassionate option. Proponents, that is, supporters of euthanasia, will tell you that theirs is an act of mercy, that they did it for the person whose mind had been shattered or who had been told that they have a terminal illness. So we must ask ourselves whether dispatching someone with a lethal injection instead of giving them the best possible love and care and ultimately a good death are valid or licit alternatives. Our own experiences can sometimes cloud our judgment, especially when there's been a failure to provide proper care or the response has been inadequate. Individual stories can come to dominate the debate. It's worth saying that if we have been fortunate enough to be with a loved one when they leave this world, knowing how much they are loved and valued, that experience should also be weighed in the equation. Historically, the mandate of the health carer is crystal clear. They must always care and never set out to kill or to assist in killing. Assisted living, and for that matter, assisted dying, is practiced every day by good healthcare professionals. Those who practice genuine assisted dying know that they have no duty to keep someone alive who has no desire for officious treatment. There's no moral or ethical obligation to go on receiving burdensome treatment when it's doing no good. There's no moral or ethical obligation to prolong life at all costs, and in the United Kingdom that principle is quite properly reflected in all medical ethics codes. The principle is that a medical professional must assist with the relief of pain and the alleviation of suffering, but their motive must not be to kill the patient. Deliberately eliminating the patient is not treatment. I passionately support the provision and proper resourcing of palliative and hospice care. The founder of the British hospice movement was Dame Cicely Saunders, a devout Christian woman whom I was fortunate to meet. She said this: "You matter because you are you, and you matter to the end of your life. We will do all we can, not only to help you die peacefully, but also to live until you die." A fundamental problem with the campaign for assisted dying and euthanasia is that it assumes the existence of a perfect world, a world in which all terminally ill people know what they want without any trace of doubt or despair, in which all doctors have the skills and time to conduct thorough assessments, and in which all relatives are what the media like to call loved ones. While many of those who champion the legalization of assisted suicide do so, I'm sure, with the best of motives, I believe it to be a profound mistake. We should resist it because legalizing euthanasia means abandoning better laws that protect the vulnerable and take account of the fears of disabled and vulnerable people which are set aside. Instead of putting their energy into promoting bad laws, legislators, policymakers and governments should work instead for world-class palliative care and resources for health care that values assisted living rather than expediting death.